Brian Dorsey in the first chair over here. Brian is the manager of research technology at John Deere, responsible for providing strategic direction, growth and implementation globally. 13 plus years with John Deere. He has a master's from DePaul. He has expanded the use of internet research throughout John Deere with dealers, customers, and employees. And a key accomplishment of Brian's is the development of the John Deere panel, their proprietary global online customer panel. And Monica is the director of customer and consumer insights at Campbell Soup, working on brands such as Campbell's, Tylenol, and Planters throughout her career. Her first job in marketing research was an intern inputting the groundbreaking grocery store scanner data, which was then delivered monthly in hard copy format and put into Lotus spreadsheets. I sometimes talk to my staff about key punch cards. Today she's responsible for leading the consumer and customer insights team for the $3.5 billion Campbell Soup Simple Meals and Beverages-based business. And then we have Rachel Dreyfuss. Rachel most recently was Vice President of Marketing Intelligence for Time Warner Cable. She's a marketing insights professional recognized for linking consumer insights to brand growth. While at Time Warner, Rachel built and led a centralized research capability for the $20 billion corporation. Prior to Time Warner, she was with in market research at Gemstar TV Guide. By the time you see her at the next conference, Rachel will be on to another opportunity. But if there's something that you wanted to talk to her about, she'll be available afterwards. And we have Menaka Gopinath. Menaka Gopinath from Ipsos SMX, which is the social media exchange at Ipsos. She is the North American practice lead and a global community expert. And then at the end of the chairs, we have Kathy Allen, who is the president and CEO of Decision Insight. She's instrumental in developing leading-edge virtual shopping solutions that measure the behavioral impact of shopper strategies in the store, at the restaurant, and on the web. Under Kathy's direction, they have validated SimuShop, a virtual shopping platform and suite of award-winning shopper IQ research solutions. So we're going to open up the panel with this question. In the ever-changing insights space, what is the impact of Agile innovation on market research? And since I introduced her last, I'm going to give Kathy the opportunity to speak first.
Thanks, Jeff. You know, I would say Agile innovation in our company, we kind of used pioneering like 10 years ago when we launched a simulated virtual shopping platform online in an era where the industry really was just beginning to engage with online as a research platform itself. So for us, innovation is really about pioneering. It's about disruption. It's about activating on opportunity. And the Agile sort of innovation going on since the last 10 years that we've been involved in really working online and recreating the context of the purchase decision of shoppers, behavioral economics, neuroscience, biometrics, facial recognition, all of those elements of kind of the why behind the decision has been accelerating with the technology and the abilities of bandwidth, really, honestly, and the ability to pump some of that information through online as well. And we can overlay that into the behavioral metrics that we capture in the shopping. And it really has enhanced, to a great degree, the ability for us to deliver at a much higher level.
So I hear it's boring to go in order, so we'll give Brian the next shot at it.
Sure, thank you. I actually think it's a good thing, and I heard the gentleman from Ford speak yesterday. I thought it was very telling. As a large manufacturing organization, you know, oftentimes our products take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to develop from idea to actually delivering it to consumers. And with that, over time, our clients have got used to research taking that long. And as a lot of our organization is adopting some of the actual Agile innovation with some of our technology projects, they're learning that research can come just as fast and iterative. So I think it's driving some changes within our organization. The problem I think that it causes is that not many internal staffs are staffed to go with that change immediately. So it's causing us to be agile on our feet of how we tackle projects. It's not sequential all the way through and can take 6 months to a year to do a project anymore. It's got to be a week or two to do some things. So you get creative with how you solve internal clients' problems. So it's picking and choosing from vendors and on what you get from them and trying to package it together and piece it together with other pieces and parts you get from other people as well. So,
Minako, would you like to add thoughts?
Sure. It's Mainika, like the state of Maine, just as a heads up.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm used to it. So I think from my perspective, I believe when I think of the word agility, I think about being more flexible, being open, not being so stuck in how things might have been done in a different age. I really think that it's about being willing to get your hands dirty. Sometimes the answer might be in places you aren't expecting it, and maybe go on Pinterest and look at what people are posting about new makeup they're putting on, and you might learn something from that. So I really think that it's kind of thinking differently and being willing to try different things and not so scared of what that might mean.
Let's go to Monica.
I think what we're trying to do is just learn. We will try things and learn, talk to each other, apply our learnings. So similar to how we're involving the consumer earlier in our process, we're bringing in our cross-functional team members earlier on in the process, and we're having conversations earlier and more often about what we're hearing, listening, seeing, touching, feeling with our consumers. So we're, learning and applying.
And Rachel.
From my perspective, I have the original Agile from the technology engineer's perspective, which is they have traded their month-long requirements documentation process for fast prototyping, and they call it sprints. And when I got involved, the engineering department was creating the iPad app for Time Warner Cable, and they said, we want consumers involved, but only if you can keep up with our sprints. And so immediately I had to reconsider, the old way of doing things where we would bring people into labs and do focus groups and kind of show them flat screens and things. These guys were already developing. So it's a little bit different than the co-creation we've heard in the past, where consumers are just kind of getting together and doing things on their own, coming up with things. In a technology space, often you have to show them something. They have to show them the initial concepts. And so these guys were showing the concepts, and one way to do this is to convene a quick panel, 6 to 8 weeks, temporary, 35 consumers, because in the App Store, if you have a beta, you can only have a few users. And these consumers were iterating and giving feedback weekly. So that's one specific example of how market research adapts to Agile. And the second one I quickly want to mention, because yesterday there was a couple of speakers who mentioned anticipation. So we're in the age of co-creation now, but the next age is anticipation. Another technique I've used is to actually be more proactive and get the consumers and the engineers around a table together. And in this case, it was millennials. And we were asking them, how do you use TV and internet today? Very differently than, other segments use them and so forth, as you all know. And, what are your pain points, and how do you really want your products and services to work for you? And the engineers were, in many cases, in the same cohort, but they learned so much, and they were so responsive to hearing, the consumers. The first time I did it, I wanted to hit the ball out of the park, and I took no chances. I had a moderator do homework assignment with these recruited millennials and do an edited tape and figure it all out, because I just wanted the engineers to see the value of this kind of technique. And sure enough, it was something that they wanted again and again. So that's just two specific ways that market research can change to adopt to Agile.
So you can tell from the answers that I think a lot of the discussion sort of centers around there's organizational Agile and there's methodological Agile. So I'm going to give the panel first an organizational question. What have you done from an organizational perspective to foster Agile innovation? And we'll start with Monica.
Okay, so I guess most of us are familiar with how difficult it is to have sustained success in innovation in the consumer packaged goods environment. So at Campbell's, we realized that we had to fundamentally shift the way we thought about our innovation philosophy, and importantly, that we had to fuel not just what we did, but how we do it. So we put a very consumer-centric process in place, and we reorganized our teams. And on the front end, what we did was we brought together a cross-functional collaboration teams, and we thought that that was very important so that all the vested parties would be right there in the thick of things and experiencing the epiphany of an insight or the inception of an idea. Also, what we did was we linked our commercialization team with our innovation team so that there's no changing paddles midstream and everybody's rowing in the same direction. Importantly, we found out too that our senior leadership needs to be involved, and committed, and engaged. And having dedicated resources is absolutely a signal of their dedication. But what we've had at Campbell's is innovation forums where we role model and share innovation behaviors. And we have found that that is really changing the culture of a 140-year-old company.
So that's from a corporate perspective. Menaka or Kathy, do you want to
Speak to
from a supplier perspective?
Sure. Well, I think actually at a company like Ipsos, we're pretty big. So I think a lot of the same things that Monica mentioned apply. What I think is important to think about is just, as Insights mentioned earlier, collaborating with your consumers is really important. Collaborating with your employees is just as important. And that's one of the things that we put into place at Ipsos. We actually have, we do short-term community executions, essentially. So, for example, when Ipsos SMX rolled out earlier this year, we did a 6-week community so that we could talk to all of the employees across Ipsos and educate them on what that meant for Ipsos and how they can leverage it, how they can integrate it into what they're doing, and then hear what they had to say about that and what their questions were so that we could innovate together as an organization.
And Kathy?
Yep. And I'm not Ipsos. we're a very specialized niche organization, sort of in the measurement of behavior. So we started out in the consumer space and a lot of new product development. In the 30-plus years we've been a research firm and had all of those phones and rooms and did all kinds of things and have evolved. And I think Lisa said it from Merck today. You know, we are an evolution as an industry. It's a constant evolution. So for us, we're specialized, and where I think organizationally I've seen the biggest change for us is as we evolved from consumer and then sort of that category management by nature of what we do, then the shopper sort of coming into really full circle, and your organization's actually redefining who's going to be on whose teams and now being much more cross-collaborative, which was hard for us because we had to kind of straddle both. And brand was somewhere out there, and they're all kind of coming to the table too. So for us, it's really being able to make sure that we're addressing the needs and the problems to solve across all three of those areas, and they're different. And then also embracing the agile, innovative components that we can add to what we do as far as measuring the shopper and adding those biometrics or emotions or facial sort of innovative technologies to what we're doing to really, really enhance the delivery of what we're trying to do for our clients.
And so now I'd like to ask, what sorts of things have you done to shorten the time to get things to market faster? And let's actually start again with Monica.
Okay. So a couple of things I would like to point out. Going back to the front-end teams, one of the things that they're very focused on is generating platforms as opposed to one-off ideas. And what this allows us to do is have a gaggle of ideas that the team can be working on at any point in time across our process. And our senior leaders have challenged us, while they have these forums, they've challenged us that innovation is really everybody's job, not just the front-end team's job. And so we all take it very personally and are very committed to it. So recently, our kitchens team redesigned the kitchens, the Campbell kitchens, to reflect the kitchens of our consumer segments that we find very important to us. And so those kitchens are reflective. We'll have Susie's kitchen, which will have Susie's appliances and go-to ingredients, her pots and pans, down to the magnets and pictures on her refrigerator. And then we recruit consumers in to help us create products, recipes, varieties. And again, it brings the consumer into the conversation in a familiar context for her, which we believe is very important, as Kathy just talked about. And the other thing that we've recently done, which has been pretty new for us, is we've developed, implemented, piloted a retail lab. And the premise is that we'll develop hypotheses against assortment strategies and label designs and shelving contexts, and we bring the consumers in and go shopping and talk to them in aisle. So just a couple of examples of some of the ways we're speeding up our decisions and having the conversations with consumers and with our business partners earlier and more often.
And Brian, I know you've done these sorts of things at John Deere also, so would you give some thoughts there?
Sure. A couple points I'd say to add on to Monica. Both on the front end, the gentleman from Google spoke about the build upon surveys. We went to that probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we do very few now of just single topic surveys all the way through. It's kind of built upon month by month. And I think that's very good for the respondent, but very good for us too, to kind of learn and build from month to month. That helps. I think a bigger point, you try to bring things to market quicker, is on the back end of the process. And when your demand's growing at 75-80% year over year within a group, you can't be all to everybody. And I think we waste so much time in building reports and trying to do all the formal presentations that we really have to have the internal client prove to us that they need an internal report before we're going to spend a lot of time on it. And I think if we're going to put a plea out to suppliers, I've asked and asked and asked for years, spend as much time on the back end of the process as you do making the front end of developing research. We're still lacking on the back end as an industry, I think, and I think that'll help us as clients a lot more than anything fancy on the front end to send out stuff. We need help on the back end getting things to market faster, because we can't spend as much time as we are even trying to do away with reports as much as we are.
So I'm going to string together a couple of our questions here, and then shortly we'll get to Q&A. What are some of the trade-offs organizations make in order to improve speed to market of products or customer experiences? What must be sacrificed, and what's an acceptable level of sacrifice? Rachel, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. You might think you need to trade off rigor and accuracy if you're doing things more quickly. And at first, I was thinking, no, you don't have to trade anything like that. But you actually do. What we sacrificed was actually the quantitative part of it a little bit. We had qualitative feedback on this iPad app. We have qualitative feedback now on consumers' needs and anticipation. And what's happening is the engineers and the product managers are building products and putting them out there. So you don't do the qualitative till after something's out in the market. I mean, you do it. You just don't have the luxury of your process, your sequential qual-quant test, implement the same way. So I think that's one thing that's sacrificed. But the joy of it, what you really gain, too, in terms of making things faster and more efficient, and this is maybe towards the last question more, when you're doing co-creation, don't forget to include departments you may not think about including or who haven't raised their hands to be part of it. For example, if you're working with the product managers and the engineers, the marketing communications group can hear firsthand, what benefits are surfacing from these new products and features. And they can create that campaign, that awareness and introduction campaign right during the process of development, which is what happened with the iPad app. One of the consumers on the panel said, hey, this makes every room a TV room, watching TV on the iPad. And there was our slogan. There was our first spot. So really, just because we had the right people on the team and more inclusive and collaborative than we might have been otherwise, we were speedier.
So to add on to that question, what can you do fast, but perhaps not as thorough, that does not involve sacrificing rigor, validity, or accuracy? And Menaka, would you like to speak to that?
Yep, I won't correct you again.
Didn't I get it right that time?
Menaka.
Oh.
Thank you. Sure. So I'm actually, yeah, I know, right? I'm in the social media group within Ipsos, but actually our IIeX team has just rolled out a capability for overnight concept testing. So it's essentially allows you to do kind of apply the same methodology that we do for broader studies, but do it overnight. And one of the things that I guess you sacrifice is you can't be as customized, I guess, right? Your questionnaire needs to be more formatted and structured and streamlined so that you can do it that quickly. But from a methodological, man, that's a hard word to say, perspective, I think you're still getting the same kind of analysis and understanding of the core question.
And Kathy, do you want to add to that?
I think I just go with what Menaka's saying. I mean, there's times where we've had to pare down, what we're doing, and actually with mobile, we've taken mobile now out with some of the work we're doing with trip missions and segmentation work, and it's in the moment. It's not as much futuristic, but we can capture in the moment kind of decisions and behavior. So it's not maybe as rich, but sometimes we don't have the time.
So I'd like to get the audience here involved at this point, and we'll open it up to two things. One is to sort of say, when you were discussing earlier, what are some of the terrific examples that were discussed in your row that you'd like to share? And do you have more questions for the panel? So we'll bring a microphone to you, and very up front. I already tried the standing next to you so that you could use the...
Well, it's just a question. I'm wondering with this agile innovation, the relationship with the customer from a research perspective, because I'm hearing like a couple different things. One is we don't want to make the experience any longer than it needs to be, but yet with the agile innovation, it's often an iterative process, and maybe you want to carry them through a little bit so you're getting that voice throughout. So what's the best recipe for that?
I can take that. I think it's not about speed for the consumer necessarily. I think it's speed for the business people. From a member or a consumer perspective, I think it's about having a meaningful conversation, being engaged in a way that matters to them, being aligned with their existing affinities, and leveraging that to learn from it. So I think the clear thing from the social age is respect, two-way dialogue, creating a meaningful relationship. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to learn from it, and people are willing to engage with you for longer periods of time if you're delivering on that.
I would just add, we've talked about big data, but a lot of, in our world, transaction data, loyalty data, and starting to customize the communication and being able to target, that communication to that individual shopper or that individual consumer, and being able to do that over time is a really effective and powerful way too.
I might just add to that. I think it actually helps panels, right? Especially because one thing we want to drive back to them is what we're working on or what they told us and how we reacted to that. And oftentimes in the past, if you did a one-off study and then it took time to absorb that and make a change, they're not seeing anything in our industry for years, right? If their opinion had any impact. And if we're using the Agile methodology, if you're doing something every 2 weeks, months, something like that, you can show them through the next iteration, hey, we learned this, now we're adjusting, now we're going from there. So it's automatically an incentive for the panelists, and that's how we typically incent panelists, by giving information back.
Who'd like to share from their row? Who had the great ideas that were implemented already?
Thanks. I can be fast. We do a fair amount of gameplay testing for the game publishers, and they've actually been pushing us to drop the reporting, do whatever you can to speed things up. You know, yeah, we've been doing it once a month. We'd like to do it once a week now. And by the way, we'd like the engineers to be present, and we'd like to do it 2 days in a row and make a change to the product on the fly during the study, and then the next day do the same exercise and see if we get any immediate response or not. So just one example for one sector.
Up here.
I think I commend Campbell's for going down the path. I was with PepsiCo for 10 years and ran a learning lab for 2.5 years, everything from neuroscience to a simulated shop using real grocery carts. And I think the context, the closer we can get to the context and then iterate around the context of where I am and what are the emotions I will be experiencing, whether it's in a living room, in a kitchen, or in a grocery store. And I think that's where the big ideas come out of, is as I can get in that moment. And I think what we're learning at this conference is in the moment matters, because that's where those emotions are. And then the behavior becomes more accurate because it's taking all that subconscious and unconscious thought into that situation. And I think whether you do it virtually or you do it in a lab, I think that's where we get to better information moving forward.
Anybody else like to share the row? Anybody else have a question for the panel? In the left there.
I'm not sure. There's a question for any of you up there. For market researchers and for insight professionals such as ourselves, we start a project, we establish the scope, we decide our path, and it's a very strong waterfall technique. One of the biggest challenges is to take that shift, because when people talk about Agile, it brings up the idea of scope change. And how have you worked with that? How have you worked with your vendors to partner with them? Brian, I was thinking to yourself, what do you look for in proposals? Many people put forth a nice methodological approach, their 6-week plan. What are you looking for? Because if you're doing an Agile approach with your 1 to 2 week sprints, it's very different.
Yeah, great question. I'll first answer is we're still definitely learning, right? So no way are we the expert in this. And I was thinking earlier, I said, what do we have to sacrifice? The biggest thing that we probably will have to sacrifice as we go forward is the internal client wanting to change and get things 100% right before we go do the project. And it just kills time, right? No, let's add this, adjust this, and let's get it exactly right. And I think how we correct that going forward is the cost factor. I mean, we're looking at some of our cost of doing online versus traditional, and frankly, it's so cheap to do online that people don't get so concerned if you scope change, right? Because we're still minuscule % of our total research budget for online compared to other competitive intelligence, primary research, stuff like that. So cost isn't a concern, right, if we change that scope, so we can adjust on the fly and always do them all as little individual projects. So if that gets to your question or not, but I'm not as concerned about changing month to month or as we go through the iterative process as getting it all right on the start. And then if you adjusted costs for those old primary projects, man, that really impacted things and budgets.
Anyone else? Kathy?
I would just say, we emphasize in our organization the need to make sure that we have clarity up front about the objective. So if we're trying to accelerate the information that we need, then I also think there's got to be some reality around, what are we trying to garner here, and make sure that we design it so that we can get to that. And changes are always havoc when you're trying to get things done in a nanosecond. So it's good to get it nailed.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Hi, thank you very much to all of you. I'm building on Monica's comment about earlier and more often. How are you applying that philosophy when it comes to the technologies, the tools, the vendors, all the fun that everybody has been exposed to, both in this room and I'm sure lots of people call upon you, et cetera. So how are you applying that from that side of the equation?
So I'll take a whack at it. We are constantly, so we have the gift of what we call the hub, We have a group of individuals who are constantly trolling to see what's new and different out there that will help us understand the consumer and the decision process quicker, and from an unconscious perspective, more quickly. Not just more quickly, but better, in a more quality way. So that's a gift that we have. And we're constantly working with our research partners to help us. What do you have? Where are you? What are you beta testing? Make us aware of what you're beta testing so that we can be partners with you on that journey.
All right. I don't want to be the one to stand between the group and lunch. So it was a wonderful panel. Please, a round of applause for our panelists.